Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Pulp Crazy. I'm Jason Aiken. In this week's episode, I will be discussing Black Destroyer by A.E. Van Vogt. I learned about this story thanks to a recent Pulp Fest posting by Mike Chomko. Just goes to show you, even when you're not actually at Pulp Fest, you can still learn something new. Black Destroyer first appeared in the July 1939 issue of Astounding Science Fiction. Some people consider this to be the first great issue, with John W. Campbell as the magazine's editor. Thus, this issue is often said to have ushered in the golden age of science fiction. Van Vogt would later rework this story into the first part of what he coined a fix-up novel. The novel, titled The Voyage of the Space Beagle, is made up of the following short stories: Black Destroyer, War of Nerves, Discord in Scarlet, and M33 in Andromeda. All of these short stories were published individually in science fiction pulp magazines between 1939 and 1950. I haven't read the reworked version of this, only the pulp version. I would categorize Black Destroyer as sci-fi horror, with more emphasis on science fiction than horror. This did appear in a science fiction pulp magazine, so there's the usual emphasis on science that takes place. The story does contain some fantastic interior illustrations from illustrator Frank Kramer. This is some of the best interior pulp artwork I've seen personally. I think that editor John W. Campbell knew what a special story this was, and he not only gave the story the cover for this issue, but also many interior illustrations. The story mostly takes place on an alien planet. The only native inhabitant we see is a cat-like being called Coeurl. The creature has black skin, and his forelegs are longer than his hind legs. Coeurl has tentacles protruding from his shoulders. At the end of the tentacles are finger-like appendages. Now, I understand that in the fix-up novel, these finger-like appendages became suction cups, but in the original pulp story, they are described as finger-like appendages. Coeurl also has the ability to communicate via electric vibrations, thanks to his ear tendrils. Now, Coeurl's name and description are probably familiar to many of you who are fans of role-playing games. Monsters inspired by Coeurl appear in the Final Fantasy video game series, as well as pen and paper RPGs, such as Dragons and Pathfinder. Black Destroyer was also adapted by Roy Thomas and Dan Atkins in Unknown Worlds No. 5, cover date February 1974, from Marvel Comics. I think Atkins and the rest of the art team did an especially good job on the artwork for this issue. It's well worth checking out. These are to name just a few additional appearances of Coeurl. I'll link to the Wikipedia page in the show notes that includes some additional appearances in reference to Coeurl. Now, Coeurl appears to be the last of his species in the area, having conquered all others. His race seems to have been quite advanced at one time, having built large cities. But it is alluded to that they have regressed back into a more primitive state after their supply of life-sustaining id became low. Coeurl still yearns for more id himself. We learn later in the story that id is actually organic phosphorus and is present in human bones. Coeurl finds a new supply of id when a spaceship touches down and the crew explores the planet, with Coeurl studying them very closely. Conversely, the crew also becomes fascinated by Coeurl. They see this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study a new species and make the mistake of bringing him aboard their ship. If you want to find out what happens next, I highly recommend reading this. While the story and character do not appear to be in the public domain, despite the many homages made to Coeurl in other media, however, Black Destroyer is available to read for free online, thanks to Jim Bain's forward thinking in regards to non-DRM ebooks and text. The story can be read on the Bain Books website. I'll link to PDF and e-text versions in the show notes. I highly recommend reading this, especially if you are a fan of sci-fi horror, such as Ridley Scott's Alien. The screenwriter of Alien, Dan O'Bannon, was heavily inspired by a wide range of science fiction stories, but I can't find any article or interview where he specifically named Black Destroyer as an inspiration. Coeurl doesn't have much in common with the xenomorph from Alien, save for their roles in each respective story. But the plot, they both seem very similar. And truth be told, Coeurl is the most interesting thing about Black Destroyer. He's the main character, even though he's the antagonist. None of the crew members really stuck out for me. They all seemed a bit too stereotypical. But given the time period this was written, that might not have been the case originally. Today I am sure there are many stories where a crew makes a mistake and brings an alien being back aboard their ship. But this idea wasn't so new back in 1939. Plus, when it's a story about a monster, most of the humans are expendable anyway. That's it for this week's episode. Pulp Crazy is located at pulpcrazy.com. I'm at Pulp Crazy on Twitter and facebook.com/pulpcrazy. You can also email me at pulpcrazy@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.